Andrew Cooper was about to experience what should have been the happiest day of his life. It was a warm, sunny afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, where he was set to marry his longtime girlfriend, Rebecca Hayes. The couple had chosen a stunning seaside venue with the Atlantic Ocean as a breathtaking backdrop. The atmosphere buzzed with joy as guests found their seats, eagerly awaiting the ceremony. At the altar, Andrew, a 32-year-old successful architect, stood with a mix of excitement and nerves. What Andrew didn't know was that this day, meant to celebrate the start of a beautiful new chapter, would take a tragic turn. Andrew and Rebecca had met 3 years earlier at a charity event, and their connection had been immediate. Their relationship grew quickly, built on shared values and dreams for the future. Rebecca, a 29-year-old nurse, was caring, intelligent, and deeply in love with Andrew. Friends and family often remarked on how perfectly matched they were. Andrew's mother, Susan, was overjoyed to see her son so happy, while Rebecca's father, Tom, couldn't wait to walk his daughter down the aisle. Everything seemed perfect, but behind the scenes, Andrew's past harbored a dark secret, one that would emerge in the most shocking and devastating way. Before meeting Rebecca, Andrew had been in a volatile relationship with a woman named Emily Warren. Emily was stunningly beautiful, but highly unpredictable. They had met at a local bar, and their relationship was intense from the beginning. Andrew had been drawn to Emily's bold and magnetic personality, but their time together soon became toxic. Emily's possessiveness and jealousy led to frequent heated arguments, eventually prompting Andrew to end the relationship. However, Emily refused to accept the breakup, remaining obsessed with Andrew and convinced they were destined to be together. As Andrew and Rebecca's wedding day approached, Emily's fixation reached its breaking point. She had been obsessively stalking Andrew on social media, tracking his relationship milestones with Rebecca. When she came across their wedding announcement, something inside her snapped. Consumed by a need to stop the wedding at all costs, Emily began plotting. She sent Andrew anonymous threats and even called the wedding venue under a false name in an attempt to cancel the reservation. Despite her efforts, Andrew and Rebecca remained blissfully unaware of the danger looming over their special day. On the morning of his wedding, Andrew woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. He spent the early hours preparing with his best man, James Parker, his closest friend since college. The two shared laughter and reminisced about old memories, lightening the mood and calming Andrew's pre-wedding jitters. Nearby, Rebecca was in the bridal suite, surrounded by her maid of honor, Claire, and a group of bridesmaids. The air was electric with joy and excitement as the final touches were made and guests began arriving. The venue was alive with chatter, the ceremony set to begin at 4 p.m. Rows of white chairs faced the ocean, and Andrew stood at the altar, nervously adjusting his tie. Rebecca's father, Tom, waited near the entrance, ready to escort his daughter down the aisle. The string quartet started playing a soft, romantic melody, signaling the beginning of the ceremony. Just as the ceremony was about to commence, a figure appeared in the distance. It was Emily Warren, dressed in a long black coat despite the warm weather. Her pale face and burning eyes carried a mix of anger and determination. She walked toward the gathering with a purposeful stride, clutching something inside her coat. At first, the guests, focused on Rebecca's impending entrance, didn't notice her approach. But as she drew closer, a ripple of unease spread through the crowd as heads began to turn. Rebecca, still in the bridal suite, remained oblivious to the unfolding chaos. Smiling and holding her bouquet, she prepared for her walk down the aisle. Outside, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Emily reached the front row, her gaze fixed intently on Andrew. Confused murmurs swept through the guests as they tried to make sense of the interruption. Andrew, noticing the disturbance, looked up and froze in shock. It had been over a year since he last saw Emily, and her sudden appearance sent a chill through him. Before Andrew could react, Emily pulled a gun from inside her coat. Gasps of horror echoed as she aimed it directly at him, her voice trembling as she shouted, "If I can't have you, no one will." Time seemed to slow as Andrew raised his hands defensively, attempting to step back, but it was too late. A deafening gunshot pierced the air, reverberating over the ocean. Andrew collapsed to the ground, blood quickly soaking through his white shirt. Panic erupted among the guests. Some screamed and ran for cover, while others rushed to help. Inside the bridal suite, Rebecca heard the commotion and bolted outside, her heart pounding with fear. She froze in horror at the sight of Andrew lying on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Dropping her bouquet, she screamed his name and ran toward him. Emily stood motionless for a moment, the gun still in her hand, as if stunned by her actions. Then, before anyone could intervene, she turned the weapon on herself and pulled the trigger. She crumpled to the ground, lifeless beside Andrew. The once joyful venue was consumed by devastation. Guests wept openly, some frantically attempting first aid, others paralyzed in shock. Rebecca fell to her knees beside Andrew, her hands pressing desperately against his wound. "Andrew, please stay with me," she cried, tears streaming down her face as she tried in vain to stop the bleeding. Andrew's pain-filled eyes briefly met hers before slowly closing as he succumbed to his injuries. Rebecca's anguished cries filled the air as she clung to his lifeless body, her white dress now stained with his blood. The wedding, meant to be a celebration of love and new beginnings, had turned into an unimaginable tragedy. Emergency responders arrived swiftly, securing the area and providing medical aid to the injured. Emily was declared dead at the scene, while Andrew was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Rebecca, overwhelmed and in shock, was escorted away by her friends. Her dream wedding had turned into a nightmare she would never escape. At the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to save Andrew. He was taken into surgery, but his injuries were too severe. Despite their efforts, Andrew was pronounced dead after hours of attempts to stabilize him. The devastating news shattered Rebecca, who had been anxiously waiting in the hospital's lobby. Her world collapsed in an instant, and the love of her life was gone forever. The tragedy quickly made headlines nationwide, with bold captions like "Groom Shot at Altar by Obsessed Ex." The shocking story sparked widespread horror and became a topic of national discussion. People were appalled by the senseless violence that had stolen a young man's life on what should have been his happiest day. In the days that followed, the community grappled with the profound loss. Andrew's grieving family prepared for a funeral instead of a celebration of his marriage. Rebecca, inconsolable, was haunted by the memory of Andrew's final moments. The wedding venue, once a symbol of joy, now stood as a chilling reminder of a life cut short by an act of unimaginable violence. Emily's motives were the subject of intense scrutiny. Friends described her history of unstable behavior, particularly after her breakup with Andrew. She had reportedly refused counseling and exhibited increasingly erratic behavior in the months leading up to the wedding. The shock of Andrew's murder reverberated throughout the community. Authorities launched an in-depth investigation into Emily Warren's actions, uncovering a disturbing pattern of obsession, manipulation, and mental decline that culminated in the violent act. Emily had long been known for her striking beauty and intense personality. Her relationship with Andrew had been marked by passionate highs and volatile lows. Friends of Andrew described Emily as possessive and often jealous of anyone who showed interest in him. Despite several attempts to end their relationship, Andrew found himself repeatedly drawn back by Emily's emotional manipulation. She would threaten self-harm or cry uncontrollably, leaving Andrew feeling trapped by guilt and sympathy. When Andrew finally ended the relationship for good, Emily's behavior became increasingly erratic. Unable to accept Andrew moving on, she began stalking him, appearing unannounced at his workplace and social events. Andrew, hoping her fixation would fade, never reported her actions to the police. As Andrew's relationship with Rebecca deepened, Emily's mental state deteriorated further. She was often seen driving past Andrew's house late at night. On one occasion, she left a note on his car windshield professing her undying love and belief that they were meant to be together. The message revealed a mix of longing and anger, highlighting the depth of her obsession. The investigation revealed that Emily had meticulously planned her attack months in advance. She had illegally purchased a firearm using false identification and scouted the wedding venue weeks earlier to familiarize herself with its layout. In her delusion, Emily believed that if she couldn't have Andrew, no one else could either. Her choice to wear a black coat to the wedding was not just a means of concealment, but also a symbolic expression of her dark intentions. Rebecca grappled with the immense grief and trauma of losing Andrew, consumed by guilt and questioning if there were warning signs she had missed or actions she could have taken to prevent the tragedy. Despite the unwavering support of family and friends, Rebecca felt isolated, trapped in a nightmare from which there seemed no escape. Adding to her anguish was the media frenzy that surrounded the incident. Reporters camped outside her home, eager for statements and interviews. Sensational headlines vividly recounted the horror of the wedding day, while some articles speculated about Emily's mental state and the motives behind her violent actions. Rebecca found herself thrust into the spotlight, her personal pain transformed into a public spectacle. Emily's funeral was a somber and private affair, attended by only a few close family members and friends. Her parents, devastated by the magnitude of their daughter's actions, expressed deep sorrow for the suffering Emily had caused. In a brief statement to the press, Emily's mother said, "We are heartbroken for Andrew's family and Rebecca. We never imagined Emily was capable of such a thing, and we wish we could have done something to prevent it." Her words reflected profound regret and disbelief, highlighting the shared loss experienced by both families. The Charleston community rallied to support Andrew's grieving loved ones. A memorial service was held at a local church, drawing hundreds of attendees, including friends, colleagues, and strangers moved by the heartbreaking story. Despite her overwhelming sorrow, Rebecca attended the service to honor Andrew's memory. Dressed in black, she stood at the front, tears streaming down her face as heartfelt eulogies celebrated the man she had loved so deeply. As Rebecca attempted to rebuild her life, she turned to therapy to navigate her trauma. The sessions were emotionally grueling, filled with memories of the tragic wedding day that replayed endlessly in her mind like a haunting film. She often woke in the middle of the night, tormented by the echo of the gunshot that had destroyed her dreams. Yet, despite the pain, Rebecca resolved to pursue healing not just for herself, but to honor Andrew's memory. The legal ramifications of the shooting were complex, though Emily's death brought some aspects to an abrupt conclusion. Although there was no trial, the investigation remained ongoing as authorities sought to understand how Emily had managed to acquire a firearm and plan such a calculated attack unnoticed. Investigators interviewed those who had interacted with Emily in her final months, piecing together the psychological decline that had led to her extreme actions. The tragedy also sparked conversations about reform, with lawmakers debating stricter gun control measures and increased funding for mental health services. Determined to honor Andrew's memory, Rebecca took action. With the support of Andrew's mother, Susan, she launched a non-profit organization named Andrew's Hope. The foundation focused on raising awareness about stalking and the dangers of obsessive relationships, providing resources for those at risk and advocating for stronger legislation to protect victims of stalking and domestic violence. For Rebecca, the foundation became a source of strength, a way to channel her grief into something meaningful. Through raw and emotional public speeches, she shared Andrew's story with a mix of sorrow and determination, often saying, "If we can save even one life, then Andrew's death will not be in vain." Meanwhile, Susan faced her own struggle to cope with the loss of her only child. The pain of losing Andrew to such senseless violence was immense. In the months that followed, she visited his grave often, leaving flowers and talking to him as if he was still there. Yet, like Rebecca, she found solace in purpose. Susan became a passionate advocate for anti-stalking legislation, speaking at public forums and collaborating with lawmakers to push for meaningful change. For Rebecca, some wounds proved especially difficult to heal. She had envisioned a future with Andrew, a life full of shared dreams and happiness. Now, she was left with only memories and haunting reminders of what could have been. Her blood-stained wedding dress, still hanging in her closet, symbolized the tragic day that altered her life forever. Despite the pain it represented, she couldn't bring herself to part with it. Encouraged by her therapist, Rebecca decided to confront her grief directly. She agreed to revisit the wedding venue one final time. Accompanied by Clara, her maid of honor, Rebecca returned to the seaside location on a quiet afternoon. Standing alone in the empty aisle, she was overcome by emotion. Closing her eyes, she imagined the joyful ceremony that never came to be. Andrew by her side, their loved ones celebrating. But as the reality of her loss settled over her, Rebecca made a solemn vow to move forward. She placed a bouquet of white lilies on the altar as a silent tribute to Andrew, promising to honor his memory by continuing to fight for change and live a meaningful life. The story of Andrew's tragic death and Rebecca's resilience in the face of profound loss became a symbol of hope and strength. It was a tale of love, obsession, and the courage to rebuild even after unimaginable heartbreak. Rebecca's efforts with the Andrew's Hope Foundation turned her pain into a powerful force for good, providing support and resources to victims of stalking and domestic violence nationwide. In the years that followed, Rebecca continued to navigate her grief. Though the pain never completely faded, she learned to carry it, drawing strength from her work with the foundation. Her journey of healing and advocacy inspired many, ensuring that Andrew's legacy lived on not just as a memory, but as a force for meaningful change. Rebecca's journey had transformed into a powerful call for change. She used her voice to advocate for stricter stalking laws and improved mental health resources. Her speaking engagements grew more frequent, and she addressed audiences with steady yet emotional resolve. Stalking isn't just about unwanted messages or visits, she would say. It's a dangerous obsession that can turn deadly, as it did for Andrew. While her words resonated deeply, each speech forced her to relive the trauma of that tragic day. Andrew's mother, Susan, remained a cornerstone of the foundation, finding solace in outreach and lobbying efforts. She and Rebecca developed a deep bond, supporting each other through the depths of their shared grief. For Susan, the foundation's work was both a tribute to her son's memory and a way to channel her pain into meaningful action. A significant breakthrough came 2 years after Andrew's death, when South Carolina passed new legislation known as Andrew's Law. The law strengthened stalking regulations, mandated better reporting, and introduced stricter penalties for repeat offenders. It also required counseling for perpetrators to address the roots of obsessive behavior. For Rebecca and Susan, the passing of the law was bittersweet, a triumph for change, yet a painful reminder of their loss. At the signing ceremony, Rebecca's voice broke as she addressed the crowd. "I wish we didn't have to be here for this reason," she said, tears filling her eyes. "But I know Andrew would be proud of what we're doing in his name." Despite her public accomplishments, Rebecca's personal life remained a struggle. Trust was hard to rebuild, and social settings often made her feel vulnerable. Relationships were especially challenging, as memories of Andrew's death haunted her attempts to move forward. Though she tried dating, her grief made it difficult to open up. Her therapist encouraged patience, reminding her that healing was a slow, non-linear process. As the anniversary of Andrew's death approached each year, Rebecca was flooded with memories. What was once meant to be a joyous date now marked the darkest day of her life. On the 5th anniversary, she decided to commemorate the occasion differently. Instead of retreating into solitude, Rebecca hosted a charity fundraiser for the Andrew's Hope Foundation at the same seaside venue where the wedding had been planned. The event was attended by supporters, survivors, and advocates for change. Standing on stage, Rebecca felt a glimmer of hope as she addressed the crowd. "Today, we remember Andrew not just for the tragedy that ended his life, but for the love and kindness he brought to this world," she said. "We turn our pain into purpose, knowing that his story can save others." Susan also spoke, sharing fond memories of her son, and for the first time in years, allowing herself to smile as she recounted the happy moments they had shared. The fundraiser was a success, raising significant funds and helping to expand the foundation's reach. The event marked a turning point for Rebecca. While the pain of Andrew's loss remained, she found a renewed sense of purpose. She dedicated herself fully to the foundation's work, traveling across the country to speak at conferences, schools, and community centers. Her message was clear. Stalking was a serious issue that needed urgent attention and compassionate solutions. At one such conference in New York, Rebecca met David Reynolds, a counselor who worked with stalking survivors. David, inspired by Rebecca's dedication, had followed her work for years. As they exchanged stories, they discovered a shared mission. Over time, their conversations deepened, transitioning from professional to personal. David's understanding nature and gentle approach allowed Rebecca to slowly lower her guard. For the first time since Andrew's death, Rebecca began to feel the possibility of love. Though cautious, Rebecca found herself drawn to David. He respected her boundaries and provided the support she needed. Their relationship was different from what she had shared with Andrew, quieter, grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose. Together, they worked to expand Andrew's hope, introducing new programs focused on counseling and legal support for stalking victims. On the 10th anniversary of Andrew's death, Rebecca returned to the seaside venue alone. Standing in the aisle where she once dreamed of walking toward a future with Andrew, she laid a single white rose on the altar. There were no tears this time, only quiet reflection. As she turned to leave, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. Rebecca realized that while Andrew's death had forever changed her, it had also given her a mission that defined her life. She had transformed her pain into a legacy of change, ensuring that his memory would continue to inspire and protect others. As the ocean breeze touched her face, it reminded her that life, like the waves, moves forward. The past could not be changed, but the future still held hope and possibilities.